I'm only telling this story once. I don't care if you believe me or not. I just need to get it out. This happened in October 2018, about 40 minutes outside Portland. I won't say exactly where, because the place doesn't exist anymore. It was a Friday night, and I'd just gotten off a double shift at the restaurant where I worked. I was exhausted, but my roommate had been begging me all week to go to this haunted corn maze. I almost said no. I wish I had. We got there around 9. The parking lot was mostly empty, just a few cars scattered near the entrance. That should have been my first red flag. It was a Friday night in October. These places are usually packed. The guy at the ticket booth was older, wearing a flannel jacket, not in costume. He looked tired. When he handed me my ticket, he said, "Stay together. Don't leave the marked trail." He looked at me for a second longer than felt normal and added, "I mean it." The first part of the maze was fine. People in masks jumping out, fake cobwebs, motion-activated props. My roommate was screaming and laughing. Then we hit a fork in the path. 3 directions. No signs, no lights, no staff. The others wanted to split up. I didn't want to, but I went down the middle path with one other person from our group. It got quiet almost immediately. Not peaceful quiet, the kind where you realize you can't hear anything anymore. No screams, no chainsaws, no music. Just wind moving through the corn. We kept walking. The path kept going. The corn stalks were tall and thick. Then we heard footsteps behind us. We turned around. Nothing. We walked faster. The footsteps matched our pace. We stopped. They stopped. I pulled out my phone, turned on the flashlight. No one there. But the corn on both sides was moving, swaying, like something had just ducked into it. That's when we ran. Suddenly the path opened into a small clearing. In the middle was a wooden shack, old, rotting. It didn't look like part of the attraction. It looked like it had been there for decades. The door was open. We stood there, breathing hard. The path behind us had disappeared. The corn had closed in. Then we heard a voice, my roommate's voice, coming from inside the shack, crying, saying she was hurt. I took a step toward the door. Then I heard her voice again, but from somewhere far away, screaming at me to stop. The person next to me grabbed my arm. That's not her. That's the last thing I remember clearly. When I came to, I was standing near the parking lot. My phone said 10:52 p.m. I'd been in the maze for almost 2 hours. My clothes were covered in dirt. My hands were scraped. No memory of how I got out. The others were already by the car, just as confused. No one could explain what happened. We went back to the ticket booth. The old man was locking up. I asked him what the hell had just happened. He sighed. "You went off the marked trail, didn't you?" I told him we didn't have a choice. The paths weren't marked. There's an old service road that cuts through the back section. It's not part of the maze. We're supposed to keep it blocked off, but the barrier gets moved. People wander back there thinking it's part of the attraction. What's back there? Old farm structures. Been there since before we owned the land. We don't go back there. It's not safe. I asked if there were cameras. He shook his head. Not in the fields. Too much area. We only have cameras at the entrance and parking lot. I asked if other people had gotten lost back there. He looked at me for a long moment. A few times. They always come back confused, disoriented. Most people accept that and leave. He walked to his truck without another word. 2 days later, I was brushing my hair and noticed something strange. A small bald spot near the back of my head, like someone had carefully cut a section away. I checked my scalp in the mirror. A faint red line. A cut. Clean. Deliberate. That's when I found it. In my jacket pocket, a small piece of dried corn husk, folded and tied with twine. Woven into it was a strand of my hair. I looked up the place weeks later. Website gone. Facebook deleted. In November, I drove back. The entrance was chained off with a no trespassing sign. A guy at a gas station nearby said the maze shut down after some kind of incident in late October. Someone was found unconscious near the back of the property. They were fine physically but couldn't remember anything. He told me the property had only been owned by the current people since 2018. Before that, it was a working farm owned by the same family for generations. The last owner was an old man who lived alone after his wife died. In 2015, he was diagnosed with dementia. His kids tried to get him into assisted living, but he refused. They hired a caretaker. She said toward the end, he would wander into the fields and get lost for hours. They'd find him standing in the corn, confused, talking to people who weren't there. He died in 2016. Natural causes. The family sold the property in 2017. A couple bought it cheap and started the haunted maze. But the gas station guy said something that made my blood run cold. The caretaker told people that in the weeks before the old man died, he kept talking about the others. People living in the backfields. People who'd been there long before his family owned the land. He said they watched him, followed him, and when he died, they'd still be there. When the new owners started clearing land for the maze, workers refused to go into the back section. They heard voices, footsteps. One guy saw someone standing in the corn, watching. When he called out, the figure walked deeper into the field. When he followed, no one was there. The new owners left that section alone, just roped it off. But the ropes kept getting moved. The gas station guy looked at me. "You're not the first person to come back from that maze confused." I asked what he thought was really going on. He shrugged. "Maybe it's the land. Maybe people just get disoriented. Or maybe that old man was right. Maybe there is something back there. Something that was here long before any of us." The person who'd been with me that night had the same bald spot, same cut. They found a corn husk in their jacket too. We never reported it. I still have it. The only proof something really happened. I don't know what that shack was. I don't know who or what was in those fields. But we weren't just lost. Something was watching us, waiting, and when we got too close, it took something from us. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear it. That voice, calling my name, telling me softly, "Come back." It was mid-October, one of those crisp fall nights where the air smells of wet leaves and something faintly sweet from the nearby orchards. A small group of us, 2 brothers, their cousin, and me, had been planning to visit a pumpkin patch a few towns over for weeks. It was supposed to be one of those extreme autumn experiences the locals raved about. Pumpkin picking, hay rides, and a few spooky corners left untouched for thrill seekers. We arrived around 8. The parking lot was lit with strings of orange bulbs, and a few families were scattered around, taking pictures and loading pumpkins into their cars. The owner, a middle-aged man in a thick jacket, stood at the entrance checking tickets. When I handed him mine, he paused. His eyes lingered on me a second too long before he stuttered, have fun. Yeah, enjoy." His fingers trembled slightly as he tore the stub, and I noticed his eyes flicked briefly toward the far end of the field before he looked away. Something about it felt off. At first, everything was normal. We wandered through the main rows of pumpkins, laughing and pointing out the biggest ones. The air was cold, the stars bright, and the faint sound of laughter from the hayride made everything feel safe. Until we noticed the far edge of the field, where the pumpkins grew sparse and the grass taller. It was marked with a faded rope and a staff-only sign. The air seemed colder the moment we crossed that line. The ground was uneven, and in the distance stood a small wooden shack, its paint flaking and one of the windows shattered like jagged teeth. The wind picked up, whistling through the dry stalks. One of the others joked about the ghosts of last year's jack-o'-lanterns, and we laughed, but it didn't feel right. Then, out of nowhere, a scream tore through the night. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. Somewhere deep in the field. It didn't sound playful. It sounded real. Terrified, we all froze. The laughter stopped. When we called out, no one answered. The families near the entrance hadn't reacted. No one else had heard it, or they pretended not to. The silence after that was heavy, almost unnatural. We decided to head back, but the rows looked different now. The path we came through wasn't where it should have been. The shack, which had been maybe 50 feet away, looked farther now, distant, like the field had stretched somehow. When I turned around, the footprints we'd left didn't lead back to the entrance. They curved in a circle. Something wasn't right. That's when the footsteps started, slow, heavy, coming from between the pumpkin rows. It wasn't the sound of someone walking on dirt. It was deeper, like the ground itself shifting. I turned my flashlight toward the noise, and the stalks trembled violently, as if something large had just brushed through them. But when the light hit, there was nothing, just pumpkins, still. Then we heard a voice. It came from the direction of the shack, weak, trembling. "Help me, please." We all froze. It sounded like one of the girls in our group. Same tone, same pitch. But she was standing right beside me. The voice called again, this time saying one of our names. It was pleading, scared, and perfect. Too perfect. That's when it clicked. Whatever it was mimicking us. We ran. None of us said a word, we just ran. The grass whipped at our legs, pumpkins rolling under our feet. Somewhere behind us, the voice kept calling, now changing tones, switching from one of us to another. At one point, I glanced over my shoulder and saw someone, tall, wearing a white shirt, standing between two rows, perfectly still. I blinked, and the figure was gone. Every direction we turned looked wrong. The field kept twisting, pulling us deeper. It felt like the rows themselves were moving. Finally, after what felt like forever, we stumbled out onto the main path again. Dirt-streaked, shaking, gasping for air. A few people turned to look at us, confused. A woman asked if everything was all right. None of us could answer. We just nodded and muttered something about getting lost. We found the owner near the entrance, sipping coffee. I told him there was something in the back field, a shack, voices, someone calling our names. He froze, just for a second, before forcing a laugh. "Ah, that area? Just old equipment. Kids wander back there sometimes, nothing to worry about." But his voice cracked halfway through the sentence. He couldn't meet our eyes. His hands were shaking. When we pressed him, he shrugged it off again, saying the same thing. Overactive imaginations, teenagers scaring themselves. But as he spoke, his eyes kept darting toward the back of the field. We weren't the only ones. A few other teens nearby mentioned hearing things too. Someone calling their names, seeing a figure near the shack. One said they'd found a fresh handprint on the shack door. The owner's fake smile disappeared completely after that. He knew something was out there, but he wasn't going to close the field, not while people were still buying tickets. We left soon after. On the way to the car, one of the others swore they saw a shadow moving between the pumpkins. Tall, fast, gone when the flashlight hit it. The drive home was dead silent. No one spoke. I stared out the window, watching the dark fields blur by. Just before we reached town, I thought I saw a figure standing on the side of the road. White shirt, no face. But when I blinked, there was nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice again. Soft, familiar, wrong. Sometime after midnight, a faint scratching sound started at my window. Slow, deliberate. I got up, heart pounding, and peeked through the blinds. He was there. The tall figure in the white shirt stood in my yard, perfectly still, staring up at my window. His face was pale. His eyes were just dark, empty holes. I screamed. My parents rushed in, turned on the lights, but when they looked outside, he was gone. The only thing left was a single, fresh handprint on the windowsill, smeared with damp dirt. I never went back to that pumpkin field. None of us did. But the place is still open. The owner still stands there every October, smiling, tearing ticket stubs, pretending everything's fine. And sometimes, late in the fall, when the wind moves through a field of pumpkins, I swear I can hear a voice calling my name. Soft, familiar, wrong. I never answer. Last October, my friends convinced me to go to the annual Harvest Festival in our town. It's one of those local events with a corn maze, pumpkin patch, caramel apples, and small carnival games. I wasn't really into Halloween anymore. I'd outgrown the whole trick-or-treat thing. But they made it sound fun, and it was a Friday evening, so I thought, why not? The festival was packed when we got there, but it had that cozy, small-town vibe. Kids ran around in costumes, couples were taking pictures by hay bales, and there was a line for the hot cider that stretched across the field. I decided to grab some chocolate from one of the vendors while my friends went to ride the hay wagon. The guy running the stand was friendly, chatting about how he'd been doing this festival for years. Everything felt normal, maybe even a little nostalgic. Once I had my chocolate, I noticed that my friends had disappeared into the corn maze. I'd gone in a few times before, but usually during the day with groups. Tonight, it was almost pitch black inside the tall, dry stalks. I figured I'd follow them and meet up somewhere in the middle. I had my phone's flashlight on, and honestly, I thought it would be fine. At first, it was just the crunch of dry corn under my boots, and the occasional laughter echoing from somewhere deeper in the maze. But after about 10 minutes, I realized I hadn't seen my friends in a while, and the laughter had stopped. I called their names softly, but there was no response. My stomach sank a little. Usually, even in a big maze, you'd hear someone. That's when I noticed him. A man, or at least what looked like a man, standing in one of the narrow paths ahead. I froze. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, and his hands were shoved into his pockets. I could barely make out his face in the dim flashlight glow, but there was something off about him. Not threatening exactly, but just wrong. I couldn't tell if he was real, or if my imagination was playing tricks in the darkness. I thought about turning around, but I didn't want to get completely lost. I tried to walk past him quietly, hoping he wouldn't notice me. But as soon as I took a step, he moved, just slightly, to block the path. "Lost," he said, his voice calm but low. I swallowed and shook my head, mumbling, "Just looking for my friends." He didn't say anything for a moment, just stared. Then he nodded slowly, and I thought maybe he was going to move, but instead, he tilted his head like he was studying me. I felt a shiver run down my spine. I tried to take another step and he did the same. I remembered my phone. "I think I should call them," I said nervously, raising it. He didn't flinch or move, just kept watching. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "They never come back." Something about that sentence made my blood run cold. I didn't stick around to figure out what he meant. I ran. Through the twists and turns, through the maze's dead ends and narrow paths, the sound of dry corn snapping under my feet. My flashlight flickered once, and for a second I thought I saw him at every corner, just standing there, waiting. Finally, I burst out of the maze near the exit, panting, heart racing. There was a small group of parents with kids, and I tried to explain, but no one seemed to have seen anyone else in the maze. My friends finally emerged a few minutes later, laughing, oblivious to what had just happened. They asked why I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I laughed it off, saying I just got turned around. But later, when I told one of the vendors about the man in the maze, her face went pale. She leaned closer and whispered, "You didn't see him, right?" "Not close?" I nodded, still uneasy. She shook her head. "That's good. He's been coming back here for years, always around Halloween. People say he wanders the maze, waits for someone alone. Some say he's a guy who got lost here decades ago and, well, never really left." I laughed nervously. "You mean like a ghost?" She didn't laugh. She just shook her head again and returned to her booth. I left the festival early that night, heart still racing. I told my friends I wasn't feeling well and needed to go home. As I walked to my car through the empty field, I glanced back at the maze. For a second, I thought I saw a tall figure standing at the far end, just watching. I blinked, and he was gone. I haven't gone back to that festival since, and I haven't wandered through a corn maze at night. But every October, when I see the autumn leaves turning gold and red, I think about that man, standing silently among the corn. Sometimes I wonder if he's still there, waiting for someone else to wander too far from the path.